Pope Francis visited the United States as pontiff only once, and when he did, he rallied Congress to join him in a fight that was one of the most consistent of his papacy, the fight against climate change.
The environmental challenge we are undergoing and its human roots concern and affect us all.
He met with former climate envoy and Secretary of State John Kerry at least 4 times. The secretary joins me now. Thanks so much for being here. And I want to talk, obviously, about climate, but I know you had a chance to go into the Basilica. In many ways, I think the two of you, certainly on climate, were kindred spirits. What was the feeling as you walked by him?
Well, for many reasons, well beyond climate, had a feeling of having lost not just the Pope, but a friend, somebody who was incredibly generous with his time, with his concern, with his commitment and the passion of his engagement. And it's enormously sad to, transition away from the degree to which he was obviously committed to it. There are a lot of other pieces, though, of his papacy that draw, I think, and hope, and you can see it from the swelling response all around the world. People are affected by his humility, by his just down-to-earth presence, by his passion for poor and for the disadvantaged. And he lived every part of his life was obviously, dedicated to being true to his own beliefs and his own word. He boldly stood up in front of Congress, despite the fact there were some denialists there. He spoke the truth. And the climate crisis presents us, ironically, with one of the great economic opportunities of all time. And I think that, the Holy Father knew that there were jobs there, but also the people who get most affected by the downside of what's happening are the poor people and the people who have nowhere to go and who see their property destroyed and their chance to have cultivation, grow food and so forth, disappearing. There are already about 40 million, moving refugees around the world because of climate. And there will be more unless we can move faster to respond to it. And finally, the Pope understood, and I heard him say it, that this challenge of dealing with the climate crisis is not all crisis, it's opportunity. And it is a way of making countries more secure, healthier, safer. That transition is something we shouldn't fear. It's something we should embrace. And other countries all around the world are embracing it, including China, and moving much more rapidly to develop and deploy the tools to be able to solve this problem.
He made a very bold statement very early on, which was to make his first encyclical about climate change. But he did not mince words. And recently, one of the things that he said, blunt, was this. He said humanity was turning the glorious creation of Earth into a wasteland full of debris, desolation, and filth. What was it about this in your personal conversations, and I know you had long conversations about this, that drove him? And do you think it had an impact?
Well, I know it had an impact because Laudato Si was quoted by people all around the world. The encyclical. His first encyclical, a very important one, was about the crisis. That makes its own statement that it was the first and it was powerful. But he came back right before the meeting in Dubai 2 years ago and put out a coda to Laudato Si called Laudato Deum. And that reminded us of the road not traveled in the years since Laudato Si.
Did he ever express frustration when you talked about it?
Absolutely. I mean, he would roll his eyes a little bit about the, human challenge of getting people to do things, but he had faith in that. Obviously, he had faith. He was remarkable in his steady, calm, quiet, but totally dedicated mission of dealing with this, and largely driven, I might add, not just by the facts of what are happening in countries where every year a massive amount of fires now, much more intense storms, much more damage, more interruption of commerce, supply chains get interrupted, but also military readiness gets interrupted. There are other major impacts. And he felt that people should understand this not just in humanitarian terms, but on self-interest of security of their nation, of their businesses, of their families. And so his concern was sort of spread across this panoply of realities that that the climate crisis presents us with. You know, it's really interesting too that this man of faith, who is here to speak about the faith of the church and some of the beliefs which are obviously based on faith, not evidence, but in the case of the climate crisis, it's all based on evidence. It's not a matter of faith, what is happening. It's a matter of mathematics and physics and biology and chemistry. And he knew that, and he accepted that. So he isn't living in some alternative world where he doesn't understand the components. He's a scientist, too, in a way. And so I really think that it should cause all of us to stop and think about the useful, simple, constructive ways in which we can, all of us, come together and be better off for it, have more jobs, have better jobs, in a sense, hopefully down the road, and live a better life because we're reducing the poison that is actually killing people today. And he was referring always to the killing of life itself on the planet in terms of, all of the life that exists in the creation of the universe. And
he was
and creation care.
Yeah.
That's what he talked about. Creation care. And that's what's in Laudato Si. That's what's in Laudato Deum. And I urge people, you may not be, you have to be Catholic, and you certainly don't have to yet be a believer about climate, but his encyclicals are really informative and very moving and powerful.
He was a powerful voice for peace. He talked about the war in Ukraine. He talked about the war in Gaza. You were Secretary of State when Russia annexed Crimea. And I want to ask
when
you...
they stated they were.
They stated,
not,
yeah.
We did not allow them to annex it.
Right.
And
But
we
they-
stood up
they
against
said
it and
that
called
it
it
was
against
theirs.
international law. Yeah, they said it. But that
can I
doesn't,
ask you
under
about-
international law, that does not make it theirs.
Can I ask you what President Trump said yesterday, that under the peace deal he is pursuing, Crimea will stay with Russia?
Well, who knows? I mean, I personally don't agree with putting that out on the table.
It's a dramatic change in U.S. policy.
Huge. I just said I don't necessarily agree with putting that out on the table. Who knows what the parties will accept? Clearly, it has to be perceived by each party as being fair to them and as a balanced outcome somehow. And I think that to announce where you're coming down as a mediator ahead of time puts everybody in a very difficult position. My hope is, I mean, I applaud the president for pursuing this. I know he's dogged about it. He wants to achieve peace. I believe that. And I wish them well in their efforts to try to get there. It's a tough task, but it's doable. And I think it's really important for the administration to continue to work at it.
He did have influence. And in fact, I should report that we just got the final numbers from the Vatican. Another 100,000 people came out this afternoon to have a moment to go by his coffin. 250,000, a quarter of a million in total over the last 3 days, Mr. Secretary. And I know that as a politician, you're probably smart enough not to get involved in Vatican politics.
I want to
but
be called a statesman now, not,
Yes.
not a politician.
How important do you think, because of the platform that the next pope has, that in terms of these issues, in terms of climate, in terms of peace, in terms of poverty, the election of the next pope is?
Look, I'm not going to speculate what the cardinals are going to do in the conclave. The Holy Spirit will come to them. It has all through history, and they will make their choice, and we'll see where it goes. It is probably not unimportant that the Holy Father appointed about 80% of the current cardinals that will vote in the conclave, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything about an outcome. And I think any of us who sit here and try to speculate or, quarterback it from else. That's a mistake. They will go in and they will respond to the call as they have historically, and we will march on. The church will march on.
John Kerry, it's a pleasure to talk to
Thank you.
And
My pleasure.
thank you so
Thank you.
much.